Howdy, welcome back to Dion Talk. Today, I'm going to slide right into the content and talk about when is tenant turnover a good thing? Because usually, it's not. I reached financial freedom by investing in buy and hold real estate. I primarily focused on small multifamily and I house hacked twice. And I have some strategies that have increased my confidence in my ability to never have to work again in my life, to have cash flow that I can count on to where I was able to actually walk away from $2 million golden handcuffs. Some of the strategies that I've used were to diversify my portfolio so that I can handle things like a prolonged government shutdown, a pandemic, or a stock market crash. I did not invest in stocks, and I am not growing a business to the point where it's large enough for someone else to run the day-to-day. I invested only in one asset class, just real estate. So I had to be certain of a couple of things. One, it had to be easy because I'm super lazy. And two, I want to make sure I don't have to go back to work. So I do a few things to diversify in the asset class. The first one is to keep my properties at least 10 miles apart so that I'm not drawing tenants from the same source. And I want my properties close to several economic drivers like a base, a port, college, hospital, large population, or big companies like Boeing or Amazon, so that if something happens, like if a base shuts down or Boeing moves their plant away, that my portfolio, while it might be impacted, is not devastated and I can handle it. Second, I like to diversify my tenant base. So I want some tenants from different sources. The first tenants I like to have are about 1/3 from the military, and the others is 1/3 Section 8, 1/3 working or retired. So that, like I said, that pandemic, stock market crash, or prolonged government shutdown isn't going to destroy my entire portfolio. It would be illegal, and people point this out every time I bring it up in the comments. It would be illegal to run an ad saying, I only want military tenants, or I only want Section 8 tenants, or I only want working or retired tenants. But you can control how you advertise. If I want a tenant who's from the military and I only advertise on base, what kind of tenant do you think I'm going to get? If I want a Section 8 tenant and I send my link to the housing authority and I say, can you share this with your clients? What kind of tenant do you think I'm going to get? So those are diversification strategies that I've used to make sure that I can handle something and still be financially free if something goes wrong in the market. But in order for this to work for me, I wanted to limit tenant turnover for two main reasons. The first, I talked about being super lazy. It takes a lot of time and effort and energy to have a tenant move out. So you have to find out how much of their deposit are they getting back. You have to clean the unit. You have to upgrade, maintain, do any repairs on the unit. You have to advertise the unit. You have to screen tenants. You have to communicate with people when you're screening tenants. You have to meet tenants for walkthroughs of the property or tours. All of this time, when my goal for reaching financial freedom was to make work optional, I did it while working full time, while being a single parent with 3 kids. Making more work for me was definitely not the goal. So most times tenant turnover is a bad thing. In this video, I'm going to talk about mainly 2 times when tenant turnover is good. There's a third, but it's really obvious. If your tenant sucks, if they're a jerk, tenant turnover is good. That one's obvious. The other 2, some people know about. The other one you might have missed if you weren't really paying attention. I don't want tenant turnover because I'm lazy. That's the first reason. The second reason I usually don't want tenant turnover is because it is freaking expensive. Like I said, you're going to clean the unit. You're going to give back their deposit, what's left that's not used. You're going to usually do flooring, paint, update anything that needs updated. There's going to be some repairs that might not fall into the deposit. Repairs might exceed what was there from the deposit. it's expensive. And I don't know if you know this or not, but it takes money to be financially free. Like, the whole point of financial freedom is that you have money that's coming in that you don't have to work for. So if you're spending money on things that you don't need to, it's a little harder to make work optional. So in almost every situation, we don't want tenant turnover as an investor. It's a bad thing, except these 2 times, and when the tenant's a jerk. The first one, that's kind of easy to track and actually gets brought up anytime somebody says they like tenant turnover, is if you live in a state or an area that has a form of rent control. Often, tenant turnover means you get to now set rents at area average or above if you do good upgrades. With rent control, you can usually only increase the rent a certain amount. In California, it's something like, inflation plus 5% with a maximum of 10%. So you have to know your local area laws for rent control. Also, there are some times rent control doesn't apply. So if you're in an area that has rent control, make sure you look up to see if these things apply to you. First, some areas it doesn't apply to anything that was built in less than 5 years. Sometimes it doesn't apply to single-family houses. In some areas, if you are investing in small multifamily and you are house hacking, meaning you live in one of the units, rent control doesn't apply to your property. In other times, each area can have different rent control rules, so you need to know what's local. But in almost every case, when there's a tenant turnover, you then get to put rents where they should be instead of where they can slowly, incrementally be raised from where they were. So that's the first one that a lot of people know, and it actually makes sense that that's when it's a good time to have tenant turnover. The second one, and this is the one that if you're not paying attention, you can miss. Normally what I did for rent increases, the first thing is I have the binder strategy. I do not live in an area that has rent control. So I'm actually able to get my tenants to ask me to raise the rent. So if you're not familiar with my channel, go on YouTube and look for the binder strategy, Dion Talk, and a couple of videos will pop up. It's a strategy where actually it makes it a lot easier for me to find my deals, and I've done nothing creative. All of my real estate has been from the MLS with traditional lending, no creative financing, no special secret sauce, just rinse and repeat, buy a rental every couple of years in the beginning, and then it got faster after the income snowball kicked in and your cash flow from different assets started to come in faster. I would use the binder strategy to get the rents where I want them by having the tenant ask me to increase the rent. After that, generally I would do about a 5% rent increase every other year, and that was enough to keep up with what was going on with rents. However, in 2020 and 2021, rents increased so much in my market that I actually used the binder strategy again on existing tenants. And I had my rent increase 20 to 28% at tenants' requests. The tenants that had already been living there asked me to increase the rent between 20 and 28%. After the conversation, they were happy. They thanked me. And here is something that might have been a mistake. Rents in my area are actually going up 30 to 40%. Now, the lazy says, I don't want to deal with the tenant turnover. I don't want to spend the money for repairs, maintenance, upgrades. I don't want to advertise and screen tenants. I don't want to displace a tenant. I don't want to do everything that it takes to get a new tenant in the unit. So the lazy says no. So for me personally, I did the right thing. If you're still working on financial freedom and you're trying to grow and scale at a better rate, you are in control of the conversation, and sometimes the binder strategy is not the right way to go. Sometimes a tenant renewal is not the right way to go. I'm not saying kick your tenants out, but I'm saying you have conversations with those tenants where you might not encourage them so much to stay. Because when a tenant leaves, the binder strategy gets the rent to increase to just below area average rents. And in normal times, that's great. But when rents increase 30 to 40%, and the binder strategy is getting a 20 to 28% increase in my area, it might have made more sense to not renew the lease, to have the tenants move out, to put new tenants in place and have a bigger rent increase. So there's actually 3 times tenant turnover is good for a landlord. Most times, dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of times, it's not a good thing to have tenant turnover. But if your tenant sucks and they're a jerk, turnover's great. If you live in a rent control area, tenant turnover can work out in your favor. If rents have increased so much in the last year or two that you are going to get a massive amount of rent increase by having a tenant turnover, like we are this year from last year, this might be the right time to have a tenant turnover. Suppress the lazy, at least for now. Do the tenant turnover. For me, it would be replace flooring, maybe paint, fix anything that needs fixed. Know your area average rents so you understand when it's the right time to encourage a tenant to stay. And sometimes, I'm not saying kick them out, I'm saying it might be the right time to encourage tenants to move. And for me, the best way that I've always helped a tenant move out is to talk them into buying a place. Explain house hacking to them. Get your tenants to buy a duplex or a triplex. Introduce them to your agent. Talk to them and get them to talk to your lender. Give referrals to the contractors that you work with. Help that person that is your current tenant get on the property ladder. And so at the end of the day, now you can actually feel good. You helped that tenant get on the property ladder and you had the turnover when it made sense. Some years it doesn't. I hope this video at least made you think. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.